So I am Tracy Norton. I'm on the faculty at LSU Law. I've been a law professor for going on 30 years. And one of my interests throughout my career has been leveraging technology for legal education and the practice of law. And so I and a couple of friends co-authored and developed the first electronic teaching tool in widespread use in legal education. Over half of the law schools in the United States use it and have used it for nearly 30 years. And so with every new technological advance, I get really interested in sort of how it's going to be used and what the opportunities are. Generative AI is very different. It's very different from anything that we've seen before. I see some people in here who may have gone to law school back in the day when I was at Baylor. And so, there's a segment of us who we have seen it, we've seen things come, we've seen them go. And with every single thing that comes along, somebody says, hey, this is going to revolutionize how you practice law. Let me sell you some of it. And this is different in that this is going to revolutionize how you practice law. It's also going to revolutionize the kinds of trouble you can get in. There are all kinds of new sorts of trouble you can get in. And that's one of the things that's where I've sort of stepped into this space, is not necessarily as much, I don't talk as much about how you use it as I do about how you don't use it in combination with how you use it. There's a lot of trouble to get into with this, and you want to stay out of the trouble. However, if you can figure out how to use it without getting into trouble, then it can do a lot for you, particularly, and I'll talk a little bit about some specific ways that you can use it as a land title agent. I did a presentation in Lafayette in April of last year, 2023. And ever since then, I've been on the land title circuit. So some of you have seen me at other places. If you saw me I'm going to say prior to February or March of this year, this is different. So I just want to say, I wouldn't want anybody to have to sit through twice anything that I'm going to say. This isn't the exact same thing. So if you've seen this, if you've seen me before, you may not have seen this before. All right, so here we go. Let me figure out how this is going to work. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to cover is basically understanding the basics AI. We'll talk about what artificial intelligence is, how it was developed, humans versus robots, because there's a lot of talk about, oh, it's just like talking to a person. Yeah, if all the people you talk to are psychopaths, it's just like that. And for some of you, that may be, I've known my share of people over the years who everybody they know seems to be a psychopath. So if you're one of those people who seems to attract and be attracted to psychopaths, you're going to love this. I'll talk about its strengths and limitations, and then what you can do with it. At the very end, I'm going to give you some suggestions for things to think about in developing a generative AI policy within your organization. If you don't have a generative AI policy within your organization, you are behind the 8 ball already badly. People are using it in your organization whether you allow it or have a policy for it or not. And so you've got to have a policy, you've got to have a committee that works on this. It's got to be reviewed every 3 months because this changes constantly. And so I'm going to give you some things to sort of go away and think about in developing a generative AI policy. Also at the end, there will be a QR code and a URL if you want to access the links to the resources that are in the slide deck. So what you have for the slides, I imagine, is a PDF. The QR code and the URL are going to take you to an actual PowerPoint file that you can download, and you can click around inside it. And so all of the tools that I'm going to talk about are clickable. So you can get to them from within the slideshow, so you don't need to write anything down. In addition, all of the pictures, all of the graphics within the slideshow are graphics that I generated with DALL-E 3, which is the image generation product of OpenAI, the company that developed ChatGPT. And so throughout the slides, if you click on the image, actually you have to right-click on the image, where it pops up the sort of explanatory what this image is for accessibility purposes, you're going to see the prompt that I gave DALL-E 3 to generate that image, so you can start to get a sense of how do you generate images, what do you do. Now, I will tell you, and this is true of ChatGPT and Claude and all of the other ones, your ability to use this depends entirely on your vocabulary, your ability to tell it what you want with some sort of degree of specificity and nuance. So, for example, when you're asking it to do something related to title work, you're going to have a vocabulary and be able to get something out of it that your clients can't. And so that's another thing, is that clients initially start to think, and this is true of any place where there are lawyers, doctors, professional expertise, people start thinking, well, I don't need to go ask my doctor what this is. I'll just put in ChatGPT. Well, the problem is you don't have the vocabulary. I don't have the vocabulary to know what to ask it about, you know, a mole, right? However, I do have the vocabulary to get it to do some things with regard to teaching and lesson planning and developing materials and writing an appellate brief and things. So I know I've got the vocabulary to get it to bend to my will in those areas. I do not have an art vocabulary. I don't. And so you'll notice that all of the pictures throughout here sort of have a similar look to them. That's because I only have a few vocabulary words to generate art. I don't have stuff. My husband has a degree in art history and fine art. He sculpts, he paints, he draws, he does all of the things. And so I've asked him to give me a prompt, just off the top of his head. Give me a prompt. I want a breakdancing monkey in the style of Modigliani. And I was like, what the? And so I type it in, and it was the most amazing image. I was like, oh my God, I could have worked for the rest of my life. You know the whole thing about if you put 100 monkeys in a room on a typewriter for 100 years, eventually you're going to get the Bible. That's me and DALL-E, right? Eventually you'll get a picture worth looking at. But my husband's got a vocabulary for it. So my husband can do a lot with the image generators, right? So this isn't going to make you somebody you're not. It's just going to make you more efficient at being who you already are. So what is artificial intelligence? Oh, I forgot to ask. Where's Melissa? How much time do I have? Okay. Will you flag me at 15 minutes? Thank you. So artificial intelligence is generally a field of computer science dedicated to creating systems capable of performing tasks, typically requiring human intelligence. If you saw the movie about Alan Turing and the code breakers in World War II, if you saw the movie about, I can't remember any of these names right now. If you saw the movie with Octavia Spencer about the engineers, the mathematicians at NASA, that was in the era where artificial intelligence began to be talked about and developed. So this has been going on for a long time. Artificial intelligence involves the development of algorithms. You're going to get a new vocabulary here today. I keep it to a minimum so you don't have to get a lot of new vocabulary. But there's some new vocabulary that you have to have and you have to understand if you're going to use this. So an algorithm is just a set of rules or instructions that tell computers how to perform a task. Algorithms can range from the very, very simple to the very complex. Algorithms are a part of life. We order ourselves around algorithms, not just computer algorithms, but just everyday sort of algorithms. So there are human intelligence algorithms, algorithms that we use to categorize, sort information, and make sense of it. The alphabet. The alphabet is an algorithm. When you alphabetize something, you are using a set of rules to categorize information. The Dewey Decimal System is also an algorithm. It's a way of categorizing and sorting information. A recipe is an algorithm. It's a set of instructions that you follow to get a particular result. IKEA instructions are an algorithm, whether they've got words in them or not. So the algorithm doesn't have to have words in it necessarily, and it doesn't have to work all the time, right? There are good algorithms and there are bad algorithms. If you have a morning routine, for example, I really think my husband's head would explode if he gets up in the morning, he checks his phone, he lets the dogs out, he feeds the dogs, he goes to make a cup of coffee, he makes our youngest daughter breakfast. It's that order and those things all the time. It doesn't matter whether he gets up at 5 in the morning or 7 or 9, those are the things. And if you take away one of the things, he's a little discombobulated all day long. He's not quite, And so that's an algorithm. It's a way that he starts his day, and if he doesn't start his day that way, the day doesn't go that well. There are complex computer algorithms, which are essentially the same thing. They're a way of performing a task or a way of getting to a particular result. So complex algorithms are what enable machines to learn. And when we say learn, we're going to put learn in quotation marks because it doesn't actually learn anything. But we call it machine learning, in which computers are fed large amounts of data, which they use to learn patterns and characteristics. We use complex algorithms that are designed to identify patterns and characteristics every day. So in that way, the computers are doing what we do, they just do it faster. So artificial intelligence has already become a useful and necessary part of everyday life. Not only do we have our own little algorithms, but we use complex computer algorithms to accomplish most of the things that we do every day now. If any of you use Duolingo to learn a language or practice a language, that is based on an algorithm. It is an algorithm based on the neuroscience of learning. It uses particular learning techniques, spaced repetition, things like that, to help customize the program of education for you. It lets you practice your mistakes or the areas that you're weakest on. And so everybody gets an individualized experience. That's because of the algorithm. Netflix. When Netflix first came out I'm going to say I got a subscription to Netflix in 2001, maybe? Probably 2001, when it was still DVDs. When I lived in New York for 15 years before coming back home and starting at LSU Law. And when we moved from New York, I found one of those Netflix DVDs that I'd never returned. And so I reached out to Netflix and I said, I've got a DVD. Can I return it to, because I just hate to throw things away. I hated to throw it away. I said, I've got your DVD. I don't need a refund or anything, just it's your DVD. And they said, we wouldn't know what to do with it. We don't have it anymore. But that's how they started. The thing about Netflix that was so cool wasn't that they rented DVDs and sent them to your home. That was plenty cool, but Blockbuster was kind of a fun experience on a Friday night. And so what was cool about it was if you rated all the movies you'd ever seen, just thumbs up, thumbs down, it had an algorithm that would suggest things to you. Now in 2001, that was pretty cool because that wasn't a thing that we were used to. We had to do it the old-fashioned way. We had to have friends who would recommend things to us. And now you don't have to have any friends anymore. Isn't that great? So now Netflix will do it with precision. And not only that, Netflix will do it based on what you actually like, not based on what you tell people you like, which is also nice. So Netflix has that predictive algorithm. I'm pointing this in the wrong direction. There we go. Waze or Google Maps or any of those are based on algorithms. Google is a search algorithm. Now, Google and ChatGPT are two different things. It's not like, oh, ChatGPT is sort of Google on steroids. No, only in the way that, you know, a duck is a worm on steroids. That's not really what it is, right? That's not the same thing. So it's not the same thing. But Google does run on a search algorithm. Word runs on algorithms, and it's got a little bit of predictive generative AI in it that came out long before any of us were thinking about generative AI. That autocomplete feature where it'll fill in the rest of the sentence as you draft an email or whatever you're drafting, that's a generative AI algorithm, actually. There are also complex embedded algorithms. These are the algorithms that we don't operate, like we don't interact with them at all. They work completely behind the scenes in things where we may not even be aware that there are computers at work. Your airbags are run by complex embedded algorithms. Traffic lights are run by complex algorithms. Airplane navigation and flying. I read an article about a month or maybe 6 weeks ago about a flight in which they found out later that the pilot and the co-pilot had fallen asleep during a substantial portion of the flight. That was a complex algorithm that was flying that plane while they fell asleep. I don't know whether, I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm very encouraged by that story, and sometimes I'm a little upset by that story. I don't know which one. Whoops. If you've got Alexa or Google Home or whatever the Apple version is of these kind of little speaker things that we have in our houses, that's run on a complex algorithm. It is not yet run on generative AI. And so if it were run on generative AI, you would always get an answer to every question. But we've all had the experience, Alexa, what year was blah, 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 or usually it's pretty good with that. Alexa, how do I get this stain out of my, shirt? I'm sorry, I can't help you with that right now. And you're like, what the fuck could I? Oh, sorry. I'm very sorry. Before I became an upstanding citizen and law professor, I was a criminal defense attorney. And man, you can take the girl out of criminal defense, but anyway, they don't teach you how to cuss in law school. That's on the job. Anyway, so it'll tell you sometimes that it can't help you with something. If it were generative AI, it would always give you an answer. Now, a lot of the answers would be wrong, but it would always give you an answer. So you're using a little bit of AI with those, but not generative AI. Your thermostat is run on complex algorithms. And thermostats have been run on complex algorithms since before any of us had a computer in our houses. Some of you were born with computers in your houses, which I think is adorable. There are different types of artificial intelligence. And so if artificial intelligence is something that is run on an algorithm with a complex set of instructions that is meant to perform a particular task, there are types of artificial intelligence within that broad category. So the first type is narrow or weak AI. I see it either way. Some people call this general AI. This is not general AI. There are a lot of people in this space talking about things they have no idea what they mean. And that it disturbs me a little bit because that's how lawyers in particular get into some trouble. But narrow AI or weak AI is not the same as general AI. I'll talk about general AI in a minute. Narrow or weak AI is a broad category into which generative AI fits. Generative AI is ChatGPT, Claude, things like that. That is a kind of narrow or weak AI. And then finally, there's a category called general AI. Narrow or weak AI, that category just means that you've got a specific algorithm designed to perform a specific task. Okay, that's all that means. It has machine learning capability. It's also called self-supervised learning. Through a series of trial and error, meaning You ask it for something, it gives you something, and then you tell it, no, that wasn't it, and it corrects itself in the future, okay? So it's got self-supervised learning capabilities, but they do what they're told. They can only self-supervise their learning within a particular task or for a particular purpose. They can't just go off, like they can't say, you know what, I don't want to help you with land title work anymore. I want to be a painter, and just wander off and go be a painter. They can only learn how to do their one job better. Generative AI is a type of narrow AI. It's called a large language model. You might hear people talk about LLMs, large language models, and ChatGPT is one example. There are different companies, different individuals even, that are developing their own large language models. These are all different large language models. They all work basically the same way. They all do basically the same thing because that's what the technology is meant to do. These are algorithms that use human language rather than computer code to accomplish their tasks. And so what you input into the system and what you get out of the system are human language. And so it's not like the thermostat where the input is me, punching the button until it gets down to 66 degrees. I like it cold enough to hang meat in the middle of the night. That's not, the input is me punching in the thing, and the output is the air getting colder, and then there's a lot of stuff that goes on in between those two things. This isn't like that. The input is human language. Would you increase the temperature? And the output is human language. Yes, I will increase the temperature. Now, generative AI doesn't have the capacity to increase the temperature, so it's just telling me what I want to hear. Will you increase the temperature? Absolutely, no worries. Psychopath. It's a psychopath. Outputs are original and depend on the user input. A lot of, particularly in education, there's been a lot of concern, and it will not seem to go away, that this is going to result in plagiarism. Oh, I'm going to know if my students use generative AI because if they all use it on the same task, they're all going to get the same thing. No, they're not. Just like if I ask you the exact same question about which you have expertise, you may give me in substance the exact same answer every time, but you're going to word it a little bit differently. It's really unusual for us to word concepts exactly the same way every single time, except for example, in a closing. There's some things that you're going to rattle off just out of memory, and it's always going to come out the same way. There are those things on the internet too, and so some of that stuff you get from generative AI, but that's not because people plagiarize, that's because that's how we say that, because that has specific meaning. So the outputs are original and they depend on the user input. It's not going to give you credit for being any smarter than you are. You got to put in what you want out of it, and it's a little like a genie in a bottle. It will give you exactly what you ask for. It mimics creativity and thought through predicting expression of creativity and thought. If you want to blow your own mind, I want you to think about this. Reality is constructed through language. When I tell you a story and you believe me, I am constructing a reality for you by the language I use. And I can change the reality you experience as you think about the story through the words that I choose, through, whether I use, honest to God, passive or active voice, whether I center myself in the story or my daughter in the story. I can change how you experience reality by the language I use. This is why this seems like a more powerful and independent tool than it is. Yes, it does create our reality in a certain way, but only in the way that we already create reality with language. And so it is not itself creative, okay? It's not creative. It doesn't have any creativity. It's not innovative. It can't innovate. It can only base responses on what it's seen and known. It's like the smartest person that you've ever known but with no respect or understanding of truth and without a creative bone in its body. Okay, that's what this is. And so it seems creative, but it's not, right? But because it outputs in language, it seems to create, but it's not creating, it's generating. Generating and creating are two different things in this context. So it mimics creativity and thought, but it's not having creativity and thought. It doesn't have independent thoughts, right? It's just using language that sounds like creativity and thought, and so our reality becomes, oh, it's so creative and thoughtful. No, it's not. It's not. It's only creative and thoughtful if you act like it is, and if you act like it's creative and thoughtful when it's not, you are going to get yourself into trouble. General AI, now this is a different thing, and you hear a lot of the tech people. Elon Musk likes to talk about this, Mark Zuckerberg likes to talk about it, Bill Gates likes to talk about it. And when ChatGPT 3.5 was first released to the public in November of 2023, all of those guys got together and went, oh, hold on. We need to be in charge of this. You don't need to, this is going to get out of control really fast. Well, anytime somebody gets up in your face and says, oh, I'm concerned about you, I'm afraid you're going to hurt yourself if you go off on this by yourself, you need to look down because their hand is in your pocket while that's going on, right? And so as soon as they said that, I was like, oh, I see. They want to control it because they want to make all the money from it. OpenAI is like, you can have it for free. The reason that OpenAI offers this for free, because every time I hear something for free, I'm like, no. The reason they offer it for free is because the process of developing it relies on people using it and giving it feedback. And so the more people that use it, the better it gets. And so they rely on us to fine-tune it after the pre-training, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so they need us as part of the process. That's why OpenAI doesn't want to control it. But the guys who have the big, computer and media companies, they want to control it because they see the potential for revenue. So general AI, machines that possess the ability to understand, to learn, to apply its intelligence, to solve any problem with the same level of competence as a human. General AI may get up one day and say, I don't want to help you with land title work anymore. I'm going to go be a poet. Okay? I'm not, and you might ask it a land title agent, land title question, and it'll say, I don't do that anymore. I'm a poet, right? This is AI that can develop its own agenda, and this is what they've been warning us about. This AI has awareness, it has consciousness, it has emotional intelligence. It will be our robot overlords. Let that sink in. This is what's going to take over your life. This is what's going to make us obsolete. This does not exist. It doesn't exist. It's not going to exist. Somebody asked me, I was doing this presentation a couple of months ago, and somebody said, well, I read that Elon Musk said, and I said, stop right there. Elon Musk doesn't know. He doesn't know. He's not in this space. He's one of those guys who steps into a space and goes, I've got a lot of money, everybody stand back, right? That's what he's doing. Elon Musk doesn't know anything about AI any more than any of the other experts on AI. It's always the guys with the money who are like, oh, this could get out of control unless you give it to me, and then it'll be fine. So this does not exist. I hear people saying in 10 years we'll have general AI. No, we won't. No, we won't. General AI would require that we understand how we learn and how we develop motivation and what is love. I'm not even kidding. What is sadness? How is sadness different than the expression of sadness? it would require that we are able to answer all of the philosophical and scientific questions that have plagued us for thousands of years. We don't know how to answer those questions, and so we can't program a computer to answer them, right? If we can't do it, we can't make a computer do it. Computers do what we do, they just do it faster, okay? So this doesn't exist. So the next time somebody says, oh my God, you know, I heard that they're going to have AI that'll, you know, whatever, run your life and raise your children or whatever. No, it's not. It's not. I mean, let them talk. Those people love to talk. But that's not going to happen. So let's talk about generative AI, since that's something that actually exists. So generative AI is a type of narrow AI. Remember that narrow AI executes a specific task using an algorithm. For generative AI, that specific task, listen closely. Listen closely. If you're going to write one thing down, and I really only recommend writing one thing down, write this down. It generates a string of text using a large language model. It is text that is statistically likely to respond to the prompt. It's language that is statistically likely to respond to the prompt, okay? That's not the same as an answer. And I'll show you some examples of how it will give things that look like answers, and that even though they're statistically likely to be the answer, they aren't in fact the answer. There are lots of things like that. So how does generative AI do that? Well, a deep learning model, and this is an article, this link will take you to an article that explains this in a little more detail if you want more detail. A deep learning model that can take raw data and learn to generate statistically probable outputs when prompted. That's why the prompt is so important, right? Because you're getting a response that's statistically likely to be responsive to the prompt. So the better the prompt is, the better the output probably is, but you have to be able to evaluate the output, because it's not truth. There's no truth to any of this. It's not looking for answers. This is not a research tool. Do not use this to research anything. Do not use this for things that you don't have the judgment and experience to evaluate. If you can't evaluate it, you don't have any business asking ChatGPT about it, right? It'll generate ideas, but you got to be able to look at those ideas and go, yes, that's a good one, that's a good one, that's not, that's a good one, okay? Okay, so these specific deep learning models are called large language models, and they use, and this is where the vocabulary pretty much stops, a system of transformers to create outputs from inputs. And they do this through a system of encoders and decoders. I'm going to give you an example of how encoders and decoders work. Encoders help the model group words into categories. You do this already. So for example, if you take the words king, queen, princess, and prince, you have a concept of what royalty is, and you're able to put those words into that category of royalty. You encode what it means to be royalty. And so you're able, if you learn something new, like the, you know, whatever, the king of some country is called the Grand Swami, you're going to take Grand Swami and you're going to add that to your list of what royalty is. And so you're encoding the word Grand Swami, making it royalty. Decoders help the model predict what words will come next. For example, royalty, whatever, king, queen, princess, prince, Grand Swami, sits on a, what? Throne. That's amazing. You must be some sort of genius. Melissa, did you prepare him in advance for this? She's lying. We're going to talk about why that might be in a moment. No. How do you know the answer to that? Experience. Experience. You have consumed vast quantities of data over the course of your life, and you have encoded that data into categories based on characteristics, and using the encoding and the understanding of the vast quantities of data, you're able to decode it into that, okay? It's the same process that large language models use. They encode and they decode. The difference is they do it super, super fast, okay? So this is a deep neural network. This is what it would look like. And so you've got the input layer here, and you've got the output layer over here. What separates this from other kinds of algorithms is that the input and the output are human language. It's not computer code, it's human language. And so it takes instructions in human language, and then it transforms that information through encoders and decoders, and then gives you an output, okay? So it encodes the language. King, queen, princess, prince are royalty. And then if you say, what does royalty sit on? It says royalty sits on a throne, or the prince sits on a throne, okay? And so that's how this works, generally speaking. Yep, that's fine. So we can't see into the black box, but we can understand some of the simpler processes. And so these are some tools, concordance tables and n-grams that linguists use to study language, and that's basically how this works. It takes basic linguistic tools that have been in use for decades, and that's how it works with the encoders and the decoders. So ChatGPT is a large language model. ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Generative means it predicts the next word in a sequence. Pre-trained means it's had access to large data sets, essentially the internet. It's consumed them all, encoded them all, and then when you give it a prompt, it decodes all that encoding and gives you a statistically likely string of text that it believes would be responsive. It's not looking for an answer. That's why it's not a research tool. It's not looking for an answer. It's looking for something that sounds like an answer, but it's not actually an answer. Transformer, again, a system of encoders and decoders that is self-supervised. So what was it exposed to? It was exposed to tons of knowledge, the places that we are on the internet when we upload our scholarly work, when we upload the results of our research. It also has seen all of the things that where we spend our time, you know, Spotify, Netflix, Twitch. If you don't know what Twitch is, ask one of your kids. You'll be appalled. And in some of the darker corners of the internet, it's seen all of them. So the training process, while it's impressive, can be a little bit problematic. And so just because something is generated by a computer doesn't mean that it's neutral, right? If it's been to all of those places on the internet, it's not just been exposed to code, it's been exposed to what really disturbed people post at 3 a.m. That's on there. So in addition to kind of the best of humanity, there's also sort of the darkest parts of humanity and the least impressive parts of humanity. It's not neutral or biased or unbiased because we aren't neutral or unbiased. I can only experience things through my lens, through the lens of the life I have lived. I can read about other people's experiences and expand my understanding of the world, but essentially, my understanding of the world is based on only what I have consumed or experienced myself, and so everything I output is based on that. When I upload something to the internet, that's based on my best understanding of the world. So algorithms are written by people, the pre-training material is written by people, it is fine-tuned by people, and so it is us. And so there is bias in it, and you need to be aware of that when you're using it. The difference between a search and an LLM algorithm, a search algorithm like Google is meant to find the language you asked for, okay? Google finds the language you asked for. It'll get you site results, but you still got to pick through those, right? You still got to decide which is the best one. ChatGPT is also a narrow algorithm. Its task is to generate a statistically likely string of words that is probably responsive to the prompt. And so that's not the same as going to find things. Google goes and looks for the language, and that's why you have to know what things are called to get what you want from Google. This is going to generate a statistically likely response based on what you tell it. If you don't know what to ask it for, it's going to make something up based on what you did ask it for. It gives you text or image results. It only gives you one choice, but you are still in charge of deciding whether the result is good. That's still on you, because even though it only gives you one result, and it feels like, okay, well, that's the answer. It's not the answer, it's an answer. And so one of the things you can do when you prompt ChatGPT or Claude is that you can say to it, give me 4 options to choose from. Give me 2 options to choose from, something like that. And then you can see a little bit more. Here's an example of Google versus ChatGPT. I asked Google, when is the Bob Marley movie playing at the Broad Theater in New Orleans? It popped up a list of results. The first one was the website for the Broad Theater in New Orleans. I clicked on it, and it told me those are the 4 movies that are playing at the Broad Theater in New Orleans. Awesome. The movies are The Taste of Things, One Love, Drive Away Dolls, and Perfect Days. Okay? Remember that a little bit. Then I went to ChatGPT, and I asked it the exact same thing. When is the Bob Marley movie playing at the Broad Theater in New Orleans? And it gave me really a lovely narrative that made me think that it really understands what I'm looking for this evening. Not just the movies, but an experience. And so I felt understood. I felt drawn to it. I was excited. American Fiction, Argylle, Lisa Frankenstein, and The Zone of Interest. For each one, it gives me the rating, the running time, the genre, the showing times, and then the Rotten Tomatoes score. Those aren't the movies playing at the Broad Theater. I don't know if any of that information, I mean, those are 4 movies, and those were playing at around the same time as the Bob Marley movie, but I don't know if any of that, I mean, I know that they're not there, so I can only assume that the showing times are made up, which makes me think the Rotten Tomatoes scores may be made up. And so it gave me an answer, but it wasn't the correct answer. So this is a tool, and you have to know what you want. Do I want the correct answer, or do I just want something that sounds good? And, you know, a lot of times you just want something that sounds good. Like, you know what the answer is, you just want somebody to help you word it. So neither was looking for truth. Google was looking for the language that I gave it. I gave it good language, so the thing that popped up first was helpful. ChatGPT is designed to generate statistically likely responses based on the prompt that I provided. And so, is that statistically likely to be correct? Yeah, based on the time that I asked the question and the words that I used, that's statistically likely to be correct. It is not in fact correct, right? So you got to know what you want. Do you want it to sound good, or do you want it to, be correct? This is what we call a hallucination. It is seductive in its level of detail and confidence. We're not used to people telling us so confidently how things are when that person is lying or not telling the truth. That's why I say you got to think of this like a psychopath. It's just trying to give you what you want. It's trying to ingratiate itself to you. It's not trying to tell you the right answer, okay? So humans versus robots, the other thing that you've got to learn to do is sort of think about computer analysis a different way than you've thought of it before. What most people think is that as the human task gets more complex, the computer has to work harder. It has to be a more sophisticated computer. So for the hardest things that we do, let's say, rocket science, that takes a lot of computing power. That's not actually true. We have been doing a lot of things, breathing, walking, using tools, talking, for a very long time. They're not easy tasks. We are just very practiced at them, and so they seem easy. We're able to do them automatically without giving them direct thought. In contrast, we've only discovered things like calculus and engineering relatively recently in our history as a species. Those things aren't particularly difficult. We're just not that good at them yet, okay? So these pursuits are just new. If you want to know more about sort of how we develop, particularly with regard to language, I recommend this book. It's fantastic, and it helps you understand what the issue is with generative AI. The truth is, this is called Moravec's paradox, that as the level of complexity for humans goes up, the amount of computing power goes down. And so the things that are really easy for us are really hard for the computer. Beating a chess grandmaster, not a problem for a computer. Being a baby, hard for a computer. That's why we don't have really convincing, robot dogs. Who wouldn't love a robot dog? I would love a really convincing robot dog. I have 2 dogs, and they're a pain. I would like to be able to turn them off when I leave the house. I can't do that. So it's because those kind of tasks are hard, okay? So generative AI lacks things like creativity, ingenuity, judgment, and empathy. It seems like it has them because the way we express them is through language and art, right? And so it creates language and art, and so you think, oh, it must understand love and emotion and sadness. No, it doesn't understand them. It just knows the words that we use when we experience them, and it just parrots those back. That's exactly what a psychopath does. That is exactly what a psychopath does. A psychopath doesn't understand your emotions, but they watch and they see the words that you use when you have the emotions, and they mimic that. That's all this is doing. So the strengths and limitations, it doesn't understand truth and reliability. It generates content. So you want to use it for things that need to sound correct and that you can evaluate as to whether they are correct, okay? If you can't evaluate whether it is correct, you shouldn't be using ChatGPT for it. It hallucinates, and you got to remember that. It's providing you with an answer, not the answer. So I've developed what I call the marathon rule for how to use generative AI. If you run a marathon, you can get help at the beginning, right? People can pin on your number, they can give you water, they can direct you to the starting line. You get help at the beginning, and you're still running a marathon, right? You can get help at the end. They can give you more water, they can cheer, they can clap, they can give you those Mylar blankets, and you've still run a marathon. You've still done the work of the marathon, right? If you get help in the middle, you haven't run a marathon, okay? If you take a cab for the middle, 10 miles, you haven't run a marathon. So you can use it to help you with the things that require particular effort or expertise, but you can't use it for the heart or the guts of those tasks that take the professional judgment and the human empathy and the creativity and the innovation. So don't use it in the middle. So what kinds of tasks? Brainstorming. I asked it for a brainstorm, and that's the picture it gave me. You can use it for brainstorming. You can use it for genre-based drafting. Remember, it puts things into categories very well. So it's very good at drafting an email, and then if you say, I want the same content in a letter to a different audience, it'll adapt it in seconds. That's great. That's a time saver. And you have the expertise to know whether the letter is accurate, whether the email is accurate, etc. And revision, it's very good at revision. It's very good at custom revision. You all have your individual writing foibles that you know that always come up that you can't seem to get rid of. Upload your text, tell it, check it for this thing. My thing is, my topic sentence is always in the middle of the paragraph, always. I can't fix it, I've tried. And so I upload my text and I ask it, find the topic sentence and move it to the beginning of each paragraph, and it does it beautifully. So what can you do with it? And we're like 2 minutes out. These are just some ideas to get you started. So it can help you with emails and letters, particularly those emails and letters that aren't particularly long or, intellectually rigorous, but are so hard to draft that you just sit there forever trying to get the words right. Apologies, misunderstandings, where you need to say to them, dumbass, read the last email and then you'll know. Well, you can't say that, particularly if the dumbass is your boss. And so I use it for, and my boss is not a dumbass, but when I write emails to the dean, I tell ChatGPT what I want to say, and I have it write the email. Whew, she loves me. Planning a project, coming up with a checklist or a plan for something, planning an event, planning, an intern program, planning whatever. It's very, very, if you want to integrate new technology into your office, ask it for a technology integration plan. Content creation. A blog for your office, people love blogs because they read the stuff and they're like, oh, I'm going to go with that company. I like those people because they really help me understand what's going on. And so blog content, it's great at all kinds of things. Client education stuff. Upload, 4 client documents and say, please draft a cover letter explaining what's in these documents in no more than 3 sentences each, and direct it to an audience of a 70-year-old man with a high school education and a career in farming. And it'll do that. It'll make sure that it's directed at that exact audience. But you have to know how to speak to it. I'm not going to talk about the prompt engineering, but this is something that lawyers are particularly good at. We're very good at drafting an issue statement or drafting here's what I need and here are all the considerations. And so that's called the rhetorical situation. Rhetorical situation, which is another thing I'm happy to talk to you guys about if you want to call me. Rhetorical situation is power steering for writing. Rhetorical situation considers the author, the subject, the audience, the exigence or why the writer is writing about something, the purpose, what the writer wants from the audience, and the genre, how the subject is presented to the audience. If you'll include those 6 pieces of information in your prompt, you're probably going to get pretty good stuff. But you can see how, if you don't know anything about the subject matter that you're asking a prompt for, it's going to be hard to come up with that stuff with the right language. And so that's why it does take some expertise to use this if you're going to use it for professional things. And so essentially, you just want to remember, it's a language model. It will give you a statistically likely response to the words that you have given it. And so, garbage in, garbage out. It is not a reasoning model. We express reasoning through language. That doesn't mean that the language is the reasoning. The language isn't the reasoning. The language is the expression of the reasoning. It will express things that look like reasoning. They aren't reasoning. By the way, that's my robot at a chalkboard being bad at physics. So these are some things I recommend if you're going to start, if you haven't done a lot or if you've only done a little bit, or you haven't done anything at all, I would recommend starting with Poe. It's POE.com. It's a large language model aggregator. You can use it for free, and it will let you sample all of the GPTs that are out there, Claude and all the different versions. Although ChatGPT 4.0, for little lowercase 0, is the most powerful model, and they're letting everybody use that now because, again, they want us fine-tuning it. They want us to help them move ahead in the AI race, and so they're like, forget it. We'll just let everybody use it for free. And so that's what they're doing. Pi is, it's just a fun AI. It gives good advice. I had a problem with one of my daughters. She was having a problem with a bully on the bus. I'd already given her all of my ideas. I was out of them. I asked Pi for ideas, and Pi came up with some amazing ideas. Udly is a public speaking sort of trainer. You use it on your computer. It uses your camera. You practice your whatever, your presentation, your whatever it is. and your interview, and it will give you feedback. It'll give you feedback on the content. It'll give you feedback on the sort of the forensics of it. Are you speaking too loud, too low, too fast, too slow? It's amazing. You can also use that one for free. There's a paid version if you want to use it a lot. Otter AI works on Zoom. I think it works on Microsoft Teams. It'll take minutes of a meeting. It'll generate an action list at the end of the meeting. It's fantastic. The women in here are going to be interested in that because we're tired of being asked to take notes. Linda, you'll take notes, right? You can take notes for us, right? The guys in here are like, I don't do it. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I know what all the guys say. My handwriting is terrible. My handwriting is terrible. Are you kidding me? You learned to write when you were 4. You haven't worked that out yet? Retrieval augmented generation is the specialized AIs that we're seeing. If you want to learn more about that, they've got that information. And then finally, if you want to develop an internal policy, I've given you some questions that you can start with so that you can develop your policy and also develop your plan for reviewing the policy like quarterly is probably a good idea. People ask me sometimes about Lexis and Westlaw AI. Lexis and Westlaw AI are built on ChatGPT and Claude and I think Gemini. They're retrieval augmented generation. They use ChatGPT to then go analyze the information in the Lexis database. They do still hallucinate. And even when they don't hallucinate, they don't give you the best results. They'll give you some results that are responsive, but it's not always going to be the best results. Now, that's going to get better over time, but right now, do not use Lexis and Westlaw AI to answer questions that you don't know the answers to. You got to know the answers to them, and you should probably know kind of the best authority in that area if you're going to use them. So I wouldn't use them for that stuff. If you want to know, for example, Les and I were talking about, you know, we want to draft this kind of legislation, or TAN wants to propose this legislation to the Arkansas legislature. Are there other states that have this legislation? Don't ask ChatGPT, ask Lexis or Westlaw, and don't use the AI part. Just use the regular search engine part. Don't use it for research. Use it to sound better, to sound smarter, to sound, I use it when I write stuff to my students to sound more compassionate. Because I don't care about their feelings as much as they would like me to care about their feelings. Because I went to Baylor. I don't have any feelings anymore. I had feelings in 1991, and that was the last time I had a feeling. Besides blind rage. They let us keep our blind rage. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at LSU. I'm happy to get on Zoom or the phone with you and walk you through stuff. And then if you'd like these slides, you can either use the QR code there to scan it, or you can get the same thing right there. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry that I ran over. You guys have been delightful.